The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agreed to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire video. Well, my friends, we have finally heard something from the elusive D.B. Weiss, former showrunner and co-creator of Game of Thrones. As you all know, D.B. Weiss, as well as David Benioff, were the Game of Thrones writers for the 8-season run of the show. Now, unless you have been living under a rock, you know that Game of Thrones is still considered as one of the greatest shows ever made, as well as one of the most financially successful shows in history. Even now, nearly 3 years after its finale aired on HBO, Game of Thrones is still one of the most talked about shows on social media. Just about everyone, including millions of fans and celebrities, have had something to say about Game of Thrones since its divisive ending. Well, everyone except for the men who wrote the show. That's right, after Game of Thrones ended and broke the internet, its writers David and Dan essentially vanished for a number of years. Not only have they stayed silent about the show's ending, but they have even avoided showing up at different speaking engagements regarding HBO's massively successful show. I think we can all assume they did not want to face the enormous amount of backlash that was sure to be thrown their way. As you all know, there are millions of fans who are still upset with David and Dan because of how they ended Game of Thrones. Many fans believe they ruined a show that was once destined to be regarded as the greatest show ever made. Now, since the ending of Game of Thrones, the fans have been dying to hear from the original show's creators. I, for one, would certainly love to ask them some things about the final season. Unfortunately, we may never get all the answers we want, but D.B. Weiss did finally sit down for an interview with Entertainment Weekly, when he discussed his upcoming feature film that will be released on Netflix. Now, during the interview, he did answer some questions about Game of Thrones, as well as HBO's upcoming Game of Thrones successor shows. Let me show you what the article says. It says, HBO is going all in on the Game of Thrones universe with the upcoming release of House of the Dragon later this year, as well as multiple spin-offs that are still in the early stages of development. But with all the Thrones goodness coming our way, D.B. Weiss, who co-created the original show with David Benioff, reaffirms their commitment to moving away from the franchise. D.B. Weiss said, "All in, we were 11 years making that show. When I say 11 years, it was full on, all in, all day, every day for 11 years. It was the best decade of our lives. It still kind of feels like a dream, but we got to a place where it was clear to us that we had reached the end of what made sense for us to be involved within that world that we lived in." It still kind of feels like a dream, but we got to a place where it was clear to us that we had reached the end of what made sense for us to be involved within that world that we lived in. It just felt like for us, it was time to move on and get excited and terrified about building something else. Building lots of something else's. We never saw more Game of Thrones shows as something that made sense for us to be involved with.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
He doesn't say much about the show. In fact, what he said really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's almost as if they want to avoid discussing the one thing that made them rich and famous. Now, for those of you who have been worried that David and Dan will be working on House of the Dragon, or any of the other Game of Thrones shows, should now see that they will not be involved whatsoever. In fact, David and Dan no longer work for HBO. They now have a new deal at Netflix, which I think is a good thing. I know I'm not the only one who's happy they will not be working on House of the Dragon. As you can see, they obviously want nothing else to do with George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire universe. I think they made that abundantly clear with how fast they wanted to end Game of Thrones, knowing damn well that show needed far more seasons than they gave it to properly tell that story. Now, I've said this once, but I will say it again, I will never understand why they didn't bring in more writers to help them with Game of Thrones. They have admitted in more than one interview that they were basically getting exhausted working on that show, which is understandable. However, if that's the case, why not bring in more writers to help you carry that heavy load? We all know HBO offered them more money and more seasons, but for some reason they did not want to spend any of that money where they needed it the most. That is one thing that will never make sense to me. It actually hurts to think about how great Game of Thrones could have been whenever I think about how amazing those first 4 seasons are. At the end of the day, I guess it really doesn't matter what they say. Nothing will ever go back and fix the mistakes that were made. Although, I would still like to know exactly what was happening behind the scenes. One day, I hope someone does release a novel revealing everything that happened during the making of what could have been the greatest show ever made.
Are you all happy with the way with the outcome of the show? Personally, or just
the fray. It's a little bit Avengers Assemble. It's a little bit kind of like.
Well, that was totally what season 7 was all about, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Character development.
Lob it all
Story.
in. But
I really need to shut up.
You're brave.
Oh my god.
Kit was really fine with it.
I was pissed. I was pissed that it wasn't me killing the Night King. I would have given you I'd have bet you thousands before we read the finals. I was like, yeah, it's definitely me.
Jon Snow has always been the hero, the one who's been the savior, but it just didn't seem right to us for this moment.
If you could describe the season finale of Game of Thrones in one word, how would you describe it?
Disappointing.
Have you shot your final scenes yet, and are you happy with how things ended? Yes. She didn't say yes. You didn't say yes.
Best season ever!